Hi there, my name is Robert Haley. I work for the City of Murfreesboro, the Water Resources Department. We had a name change recently from Water and Sewer Department. And my bailiwick there with the city is stormwater management, okay? The Water Resources Department also brings in water from the East Fork Stones River, treats it, cleans it up, and that's what we drink. And we also operate a water resources recovery center. So all of the water that's flushed down the commodes and so forth is treated, cleaned up, and some of it is recycled. We've got a couple of large repurified water tanks, and it's used for landscape watering and golf course watering and so forth. Today I'm talking about stormwater, and I'm going to talk about our stormwater system. One of you asked about kind of what is the stormwater system? Do we have curbs and gutters? So I'll talk about that. The system, I'll talk about how the city's organized, how we manage the system, and what are some of the activities, daily activities, so to speak. And then I'll get into some of the regulations and theory, if you will. I've been with the city about 13 years, and I was hired to do stormwater. I was familiar with it from my previous job. Right here, and you have this on the table in front of you, this is a bird's eye view of where we are. You see St. Clair Center, and I'll walk up here. So here's parking out here. I think I parked right there. And generally, the lay of the land, these are topographic lines, the lay of the land would shed water this way. Okay, so I've drawn some arrows showing where water goes from this side of the property. Notice here, there's some green objects. This map I have here is showing the city's stormwater system, and this map is accessible to you on the web. This is looks like some area drains, so some of the water from back here actually goes this way off the site. This map is showing what we refer to as the city's storm sewer system. Open channels, pipes, and I'll talk about that. So here we have an open channel. There's a pipe, for example, that's on a commercial site. We would refer to that as a box. It's a junction box of a sort. That's concrete pipe. We also have plastic pipe, HDPE pipe, corrugated metal pipe. So here is a street with curb and gutter. So there's the curb and then the gutter, the concrete flat part there where water can flow in it, and then that iron part there we call an inlet. So water drops down into that inlet into a box, and there's a pipe, and I think there's a pipe going, we don't see it, but under the road there, maybe it's coming this way. So our system, these are the parts of the stormwater system, and they're a conveyance system. When it rains, to carry the water to the creeks. The water does not go through a treatment plant. So like that cigarette, there's no place where it will be, captured in a treatment facility and removed from the water before it goes into the creek. Showing the different types of pipe. This is something we call a swale. This one's special, but this is an open channel, so to speak, a swale. I wouldn't call that a ditch because this was engineered, and it's like a really, really nice ditch, okay? That's in a commercial area, but that's a part of our stormwater system, swales.
So were those pipes, are they coming off of people's?
That's coming from buildings. So that's a downspout, in effect, from the side of a building.
Okay.
There's a concrete swale. I'm giving you examples of the conveyance system.
I've seen a lot of those.
Okay. You'll often see those in ponds. This is not in a pond, and one reason is Murfreesboro, a lot of it's very flat. So if a slope is so tiny, then really to make sure the water flows well, we need to put a concrete swale there.
It's gonna also
Yeah.
cave in too after.
Mm-hmm. So the city's storm sewer system, there's 344 miles of pipe. There's 5,460 inlets of one sort or another. Iron grates. Open channel, 327 miles. And then all of those are conveying the stormwater runoff into streams, ultimately. Within the city, you see the number there, 62 miles of streams, and we'll talk about this a little later. Some of those segments are impaired. Now, they're not all, meaning the state, the regulatory, the water pollution regulatory office in Nashville and around the state, they have looked at our streams, made assessments of them based on how healthy they are, and they say of these 62 in Murfreesboro, 17 are impaired. That's pretty common in urban areas for streams to be impaired. That's one of the reasons for the stormwater program that we have here, to try to turn that back, try to make these streams. For example, if, I'll give maybe the common example. Let's say we imagine a construction site, lots of soil exposed. It rains. If there's no protections, all that dirt will wash into the stream. And over time, the bottom of the stream will have a layer of silt. And the bugs that should be able to live there can't. One of the state regulators, he used to tell people, he said, I mean, look, imagine one day you walk into your kitchen and there's mud up to your waist. You can't get to the refrigerator. You can't eat. You're going to have to do something else. So same with the bugs. So the state would say there's too much silt here. It's impaired. It's not meeting.
Natural.
Right.
The natural stuff that goes on there can't go on there.
Right.
Maybe.
This storm sewer system is often referred to, in short, by MS4. That's a federal acronym. M is for municipal, so the city of Murfreesboro is a municipality. Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And I say separate. There are some places in older, bigger cities, maybe especially in the Northeast, where the stormwater runoff would be put into the same pipes where the sewage is going, just the domestic wastewater from commodes and so forth. And that would go to a wastewater treatment plant. But there's not much of that in Tennessee, and there's essentially none of that in Murfreesboro. So it's a separate storm sewer system. It just carries stormwater. So thinking about this system, just kind of common sense, this is not out of that book, but there would be, you can imagine there would be questions about designing this system. How big to make the pipes, where to put the pipes, where to have pipes, where to have open channels. So there's a matter of design. That's a part of stormwater management. There's the construction of the system. There's maintenance of the system. Rehabilitation, that's like major repairs. I use that word for. There's improvements. Sometimes as homes and commercial properties are built over the years, it turns out maybe one part of the system is not big enough. It's under capacity. So we need to make some drainage improvements because of the growth of a city. Obviously, we've talked a little about it. Pollution prevention and control is a part of managing this system. If we don't do that, then all those cigarettes get down in the creeks. And also a part of this is regulation and standards. And there's a variety of regulations. There's city ordinances, and some of those are kind of they basically come from the state and are imposed on the city. So we'll touch on that. Okay, just if you are interested, this is City of Murfreesboro Stormwater Functions Chart, I call it. And so City Council is there, acting city manager, assistant city manager, city attorney, but and I don't know how many city departments there are, but on this chart I focus on 4. The engineering department, the left-hand column, and this shows the activities that they do related to stormwater. The building and codes department, the planning department, and then the water resources department. So, which is where I'm located. And one thing, a fair amount of these activities relate to land development. I sometimes wonder what would the stormwater program staff do in Murfreesboro if, and it kind of did stop in 2008 and 9 with the economic downturn, but I guess we need to make good use of those break times. So for instance, the city engineering department, they review construction plans for new development. The planning department, whose overall mission is to coordinate the physical development of the city, they conduct meetings with potential developers, and they oversee the review of new development plans. The building and codes department, they inspect the construction of buildings, and so they have a role with stormwater management when homes are being built. The ground is disturbed, and there again, if it were to rain, and it will rain, then that dirt will be washed off. So the codes department has a role to ensure that the builders are controlling the dirt on their lot so it's not running off into the streets. It happens, but and then the water and sewer department, where I am, we do public outreach, we draft stormwater ordinances, we prepare an annual report we have to submit to the state. So those are some examples of the different departments. As I said, land development is a big part of stormwater program activities, and I'm going to give you kind of I'll talk a little about land development and then some of the day-to-day activities of the city. You asked about, I think, does somebody clean out the ditches or whatever? So just for fun, Murfreesboro's growth. I don't, and I put the latest number. I think that was, that's not verified by the state yet, but in 27, or maybe last year or the last couple of years, we did a special census. And so just very much growth. It seems like a few years ago, Murfreesboro was in the top 10, or maybe Rutherford County in the country, and most of the other ones were Florida and California. So now, this is a graphic showing the orange. You see the table, that's kind of that was the city limits back in, I think that was 1960 or 70 maybe. So, and then so the city's growing into the purple areas during the 70s, and then the green areas in the 80s, and then the yellow areas maybe in the 90s, and those blue areas, wow, in the 2000s, and then the little lighter purple up there was, this is probably...
Are those all the annexations?
Yes. So yeah, that's obviously a big part of what the city stormwater program looks at and deals with. Here, if you can imagine bird's eye view, that's Old Fort Parkway, and here's Stones River Mall. But look at all of this pavement, basically. So look at all that pavement. 76, oh, no, hardly any. So that is a big deal for the result on stormwater. If it rains up in the top part there, 1976, most rains in Murfreesboro are, 80, 90% of the rains are 1.2 inches or less, okay? So yes, we have bigger rains, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, but most rains are pretty small. So 90% of the rain events in 1976, for the most part, they just soaked into the ground. Down here, no way. It's going to run off. It's going to run off into the river there. And we can maybe talk about that later, but that has effects basically damaging the rivers and generally in an urban area. So this is Sinking Creek, and I don't know how the one on top is, but as you can see, it looks like farmland for the most part. And but this is now, so I think those are maybe dorms for MTSU, however far back that was, and now we have all of this. Lots more pavement and buildings. So so development and construction, that's a big part of stormwater activities. I'll talk about this a little. So all of that development requires that the city receive plans. Those plans have to be approved and for building to proceed. So a part of plans review is the stormwater system that's being installed. So while the city has inspectors that look at construction of homes, of new infrastructure, roads, sewer lines, water lines, and so forth, and also the stormwater system. Obviously, paperwork is a part. That's a program activity. A couple things I'll also mention. We have a pretty strong street cleaning program, or you might say street sweeping, and also vacuuming the storm sewer system. I have a couple pictures. This is we don't necessarily need to go through this, but this is the steps that a land developer goes through to get approval and construct something. So there's typically a meeting with the planning department to discuss the concept, and then they make submissions. Engineering staff reviews that. Water and sewer staff review that. This is from the stormwater perspective. When construction plans are approved, they come in. They have to get we call it a land disturbance permit, which is a permit for them to begin construction, to begin to tear up the trees if they need to off the land, to regrade it. So they're exposing dirt. And state and federal regulations and local regulations are pretty strong to say you've got to keep that dirt on site. So however you have to do that, silt fences and so forth. I may have some pictures of that. So this is an important program, a part of this city stormwater program, and I'm just giving you some numbers. Overseeing, here you see the silt fence, for example, here. And I think I know where that is. And I think there's probably silt fence here, and I think the water's actually kind of going this way. And so the last fiscal year we had, there were 167 active construction sites that were regulated. There might have been, we only really regulate those that disturb an acre or more of land. And we issued 127 permits. So there were some active from previous years. That's why. And we do monthly inspections. We're required to do monthly inspections under a state regulation, and a final inspection we do. So, and basically we're doing our part to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, keeping the controls in place and maintained. And then we now, beginning in 2010, we started to require of new development, we would say, like here at St. Clair, when it rains on those parking lots we looked at, it just runs out into the street and runs into the ditch across the street. Well, if St. Clair were to be built today, we would say our regulations would require some kind of on-site stormwater treatment. We wouldn't just let it just run off the street and down to the stream. And we call those treatments, we call them stormwater control measures, or SCMs. And so the common, most often SCM that we see is a pond, just a detention pond. Water runs into it, sediment settles out, and then, you know, when it fills up, basically, or when it gets to some outlet, it releases that water. That's also kind of that's pollution control and volume or rate control.
That's what Walmarts have.
Yes, yeah, and the Walmarts are older. They actually installed those before we had a regulation for detention, for slowing the water down at the time, and they were built under that regulation. We've since 2010, and now I've got some pictures you'll see of different kinds of stormwater control measures, like that swale we saw earlier. That was a very pretty swale. That was a small commercial development on Medical Center Parkway many years ago, and that swale is treating stormwater. There's some parking lot runoff from the back, and so that's capturing sediment. It was grassy. It was very well grassed, basically. It also had the way it was constructed, it's got some gravel down in there, so it's constructed to soak the rainwater into the ground as well. So that's a stormwater control measure. And here's some numbers. We actually got 231 development or redevelopment project plans last fiscal year. 64 preliminary plats, meaning like residential subdivisions. Somebody's going to build 10 houses, 20 houses, 30 houses, or a commercial subdivision. We're going to build, here's 10 acres, and we're going to put a restaurant, and we're going to put a bank, and we're going to put whatever else.
Look at Medical Center.
Yeah.
All that going on.
Right. So that just shows you a lot of development, and on what's the numbers here? 138 of those 167 were subject to our stormwater treatment standards. Meaning, so the story, if St. Clair were built today, they would be a site plan, they would present a site plan, and we would say, you need some kind of stormwater treatment system, stormwater control measure. So most of those 167, I mean, I don't know what that is, 75% of them required stormwater treatment. 110 of them were approved for construction that fiscal year, and 266, some previous years it counted as well, were in the development process, 99 in the construction phase. That's about the number now as well. Those stormwater control measures that I talked about, we now have hundreds, 300 maybe sites in Murfreesboro, maybe more, probably more, that have stormwater control measures. And they have to give us a plan because those require maintenance. And most of them are privately owned. And so we are essentially required by the state to make sure that those owners operate them and keep them functioning well. And so we require a plan from them. We require on the right what's called a maintenance agreement. So the owner signs a document and says, I understand I have to maintain these. If I don't, the city can come in and do it and charge me, put a lien on my property or whatever.
I was wondering what the enforcement was on it.
Yes,
What
that's,
does maintain mean? How
well,
what do they do?
imagine a pond. And my pictures of real life. Imagine a pond, say one over the many years, it'll start to fill up with sediment and grit, whatever, and it will lose capacity. So every so often, I roughly say every 20 years, they need to regrade the pond. But also little things happen, parts of maybe the concrete boxes or pipe will break, or they weren't, there'll start to be erosion around pipes, around pieces of the system, and there's that. Vegetation management is important. For one, you have to mow the pond if it's a dry type pond. Some of the other systems, they all require periodically kind of cleaning out that sediment that collects in them. Another activity of the city, the engineering department, the street division, which is almost like its own department, but they've got 4 sweeper trucks working and covering 8 service zones around the city, collect, 1,000 or more tons per year of stuff up on the street. Grit, pavement breaks down, trash. This is we call it for short a vac truck, a vacuum truck. That's just a huge, very powerful vacuum machine. And so we can drop that down in storm pipes, just underground boxes or treatment devices that are designed to collect trash and vacuum it out.
I've never seen one of those around.
That one doesn't belong to the city. I just had a little better picture of that one, and that's on MTSU campus. And underground there is what we referred to as a manufactured stormwater treatment device or control measure. It's a chamber that's designed to collect trash and sediment. It's manufactured.
Like a big septic tank.
Yeah, exactly.
So some stuff would float in there and some stuff
Yep.
would go to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Interesting.
So we don't get as many tons out of the system. We actually sort of got more years ago. We've improved. We've pulled quite a bit of sediment and gravel and all kinds of stuff out of the stormwater pipes over the years. Something that is just a part of the stormwater business is trash. And just in this picture alone, this is over Old Fort Park. There's a little stream that runs through there. It's just beside the stream. You've got cigarettes, plastic bottle, plastic wrappers, styrofoam. And that's the West Fork Stones River. Is plastic stuff hanging on branches. This is, I don't know if you all live, any of you live, in a single family home in a neighborhood, but We kind of live with this.
Why do people pile grass clippings in the
Well,
street?
Well, I don't do it, and what one is supposed to do is bag it up in a biodegradable bag, leave it behind your curb in your yard, and the city solid waste department will pick it up. Much of what, and I was hired because in 1987 there was a law at federal level passed, the Clean Water Act of 1987, that in one part of it specifically addressed stormwater. And that resulted some years later in EPA issuing a rule, November 16th, 1990. And that rule focused on industrial facilities. It said to industrial, they had never had to do this before. It said sometimes you have stuff stored outside, you have activities with chemicals, etc. You've got to keep that from getting exposed to stormwater. So it started to regulate the stormwater runoff from industrial activity, also from construction activity, 5 acres and larger areas of disturbance, and then also from large and medium-sized cities, over 100,000 population served by the separate storm sewer system. That was in 1990. That was implemented between 92 and 96. I mean, it's still ongoing, but those were the years of implementation. Then a phase 2 stormwater rule came out in 1999. It addressed small MS4s. Murfreesboro would be a medium MS4 now, but back when they began to regulate Murfreesboro, it was a small. So, and we are covered. Murfreesboro is covered under a state-issued permit, which is driven by a federal regulation, and those permits have 5-year terms. We're in the third one now. The first one issued in 2003. That's a picture of the permit. It's directed to cities like Murfreesboro. About 90 communities, counties, and cities in Tennessee are regulated under this same permit. And they don't all implement it exactly the same, but there are 6 minimum measures that all the cities and counties have to do. One is public education and outreach. Technically, what I'm doing today would count under that requirement. And public involvement and participation. We've had trash pickup days, we've had tree planting days, and so forth. One of the requirements is we have to have an illicit discharge detection and elimination program. So years ago, we found some soapy water entering West Fork Stones River. Had kind of a, I'll say soapy. We weren't sure at first. It wasn't. It had an odor to it that was familiar. Turns out that there was a car wash that had been in Murfreesboro for probably decades, an automatic car wash that was pretty far away. You know how we traced the pipes on this? This car wash was pretty far away from where the stream was. They didn't know it, or at least they didn't seem to know it, but however, their car wash water had been plumbed into the storm sewer system rather than the other sewer system where it would get treated. So that would be considered an illicit discharge. It's not stormwater, it's a wash water. We have to have a program to regulate construction site runoff, keep the dirt on the site. And then I talked about the next one, post-construction stormwater management. These are those stormwater control measures that we require to go on new development. And then pollution prevention and good housekeeping. The city itself needs to have its own act together, basically. We need to do the same things we're telling everybody else to do, keep our city operations from polluting stormwater. we mail out information at times. You will get, because you have attended this whole session, you'll get some of our public education material. That was a tree planting. We planted literally thousands of little tree seedlings on a creek in Murfreesboro that was impaired. One of the reasons it was impaired was it didn't have shade and habitat adjacent to creek, streamside vegetation, I call it. So we were able to plant trees on it. An avenue of public participation, of course, is stakeholder groups when we consider revisions to our rules and ordinances, and there's either a Stormwater Advisory Board or our Water Resources Board that hears stormwater issues. We actually go look for illicit discharges on occasion. And
You know, like hot spots or whatever?
exactly, yeah. We pick an area where we think it might be likely, and then when it's dry weather, hasn't rained for 3 or 4 days or 4 or 5 days, we go out and we basically look in the inlets, look in the pipes, is there water flowing here? And if it is, we'll try to trace it back. We really don't find much that way. Probably we get more call-ins, people telling us about something, or one of the city employees sees something that's yeah. So that's what he's doing. He's checking one of the flows that we found. This is an example complaint, an illicit discharge. This is in the back of a restaurant. You can see I don't know why this is so dark, but you can see the water across the back. It's dry, only looks like some wash water has been discharged from the back of this restaurant. And indeed, there was lots of just grease, I guess, all sorts of.
You know how they smell behind that.
Right.
Next to
And
the dumpster.
here, it actually looked worse in real life, but that looks like hardened grease, honestly. And there it's coming out of the pipe. There was a pretty large grassy area between here and a stream, which was good, but that's not an that just happened. We just lucked out there. This could have been going right into a stream. And as I've mentioned to you earlier, this is over in the Gateway District near Medical Center Parkway, maybe Gateway Boulevard. It's a bank, I think, and they have one of these kind of enhanced swales, bioretention areas, but that's a stormwater control measure. So runoff from this bank and this parking lot essentially goes into this pebbled, gravelly area. A lot of it in small rains just soaks into the ground. In big rains, it has a place to go, but it gets cleaned up somewhat or a lot before it leaves the site. We get in the streams, we collect the bugs, we look at the bugs. We're pretty smart, but sometimes we hire it out. We have experts look at them, and the state has a system of grading the streams. 32, I think it's called the Tennessee Macro Invertebrate Index. So we want our streams to have that 32 number. So we have activities that we do, and in different stream basins in the city, and we sort of have a cycle that we go through in each stream basin. Josh Upham works with me, and he really is our watershed expert and manager, so to speak. We do visual stream assessments, biological sampling, and we pick up other data on the streams. So that's just an activity of the stormwater program. Remember the talking about the Stones River Mall? It used to be farmland, and now this is engineering type graph showing how much higher the flows are, the rates, when you pave over an area, and also the size of the blue area indicates the volume. So not only do you get faster runoff, but there's a lot more of it, and it lasts not always longer, but high flows, high discharges last longer after development unless we do something about it. Am I saying that water is a pollutant? Well, kind of, because it will tear up stream banks. This is a side view of a stream, and here's the historic long-time cross-section. Development begins to occur, and it starts to dig down, and the stream bank goes from having vegetation on it to being less vegetation, bare. The soil is, you start to see tree roots that used to be in the dirt. Now it's gotten washed away. Fortunately, in Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, we don't see as much of this as other places in Tennessee because of the shallow soil here and the limestone. So, this happens in a less consolidated type of stream basin or geography or soil and I guess geographic profile. But so we see some of this. Sinking Creek is entrenched in places, bank erosion, and that's contributing more dirt to the stream. This was bringing up the question of just showing how when we have a residential subdivision, a bunch of houses go in, a long road goes in, and that's fine. That's the way much of Murfreesboro has grown. But EPA and the state are pushing cities to try to encourage denser development. And, you may have moved here because you want to get away from that. I don't know. But just for some comparison, in the kind of traditional or the suburban, subdivision, houses are taking up 2 acres in this place, and that's a real life example in Murfreesboro. Driveways 0.6 acres, roadway 1 acre, total of 3.6 acres of impervious surface. There was a proposal to build a sort of I don't want to call it a high rise. I don't remember how high it was, 8 stories or something, residential, like a townhome flat development in Murfreesboro. It hasn't happened. This was years ago. Downtown?
Yeah, I remember
You remember?
the other city people talking about
Okay. And it must have been called the Main Street building. It would have taken up 6 acres, 0.6 acres. A lot less pipes. There was already infrastructure in place, as far as I know. And so here's a comparison of just the difference in a development density comparison. Land is just showing in the back the houses, and in the front, if you had the Main Street flats downtown. So just a lot less land area, less added imperviousness, much less water and sewer lines, and then the runoff volume. The difference in amount of runoff that would leave the different properties, leave the subdivision versus the small place downtown. We've touched on this. So increased impervious area has effects on stormwater runoff, the volume, the velocity, deposition of pollutants. In the summer, that water is warmer, hits the stream, it's warmer, and so this is Old Fort Parkway, a restaurant there, just showing these impervious surfaces. There's some wash water from a restaurant again. Now, interestingly, Old Fort Parkway, built however long ago, has that median in the middle, and I don't think it has a curb for the most part. A lot of water can run off Old Fort Parkway into that. I wish they'd done Medical Center Parkway that way, where water, rather than having curbs and pipes, here the water runs off into open channels. So it has an opportunity to soak into the ground. One of the this is just stuff, grit, pavement that's washing off a parking lot. But here, it's stopping because there's grass there. So they can go in and shovel that up. And they didn't, that's an old place. They didn't design that as a stormwater treatment control measure. But it's working that way because of that vegetation and slowing the water down there. There's probably some ponded water in a couple spaces there in heavy rain, but that's okay. I talked about 85% of storms in Murfreesboro are 1 inch or less. And what if we could capture that in on-site vegetated stormwater control measures, green? So here's an example. This parking lot, the water is flowing this way. This is higher than this. This is a flat curb, or maybe called a ribbon curb. Here it's a raised curb. We don't want people driving into these places, but so water can run across here and it goes into this bioretention cell. And if it fills up, if we get a lot of water in here, so it soaks into the ground, which is more natural, more kind of the way it was before development. But if a lot of water comes in, it can overflow and go out pipes. So the landscape islands are collecting runoff.
Are they trying to do that with any new commercial buildings around here? Like malls or something?
It's happened in places, but for the most part,
It's private property.
there's probably the consensus in City Hall, the planning department and others, we haven't gotten, even though that's pretty straightforward, maybe we just don't have the written standards or made it clear, but there is a pretty big concern about, we want these areas protected so people don't drive over them. We've had some bad examples of doing this in Murfreesboro where it was just flat. It was just a depressed landscape island. It was flat. And believe it or not, people end up accidentally driving into it. So it ends up being somewhat of a problem, at least. So anyway, but this is a little diagram, and one of the goals of stormwater management is to maintain the pre-development hydrology of an area. So again, back to the Stones River Mall, before it was built, a lot of water soaked into the ground. That recharges the groundwater, okay? So there's more water underground. So when the summer comes and it's hot and dry and the streams start to dry up, there's actually essentially a reservoir of water underground that feeds that stream. Even just a little water in small streams is a boon. It's very important and good for the bugs. This is not a parking area, it's a patio, but those bricks, underneath those bricks are gravel, evenly graded, that will store water. And we've seen a lot of parking lots in Murfreesboro that they put down a gravel layer and a thinner gravel layer and then paver blocks on top. So when it rains, there's not, sometimes on pavement, if it's raining, you're trying to jump through little streams of water, right? Paver blocks, it just goes underground. It almost stays dry in a rain. So this is a grass bioretention area, so it's capturing runoff. So this is a sunken kind of landscaped area, and we like this. There's an overflow if it fills up. That one's simple. That one's a little more complex.